The company that was supposed to promote me after 6 years of work promoted a young woman, so I left the company. The lighting in the restaurant was warm, almost too perfect, strings of gold lights overhead, the soft hum of jazz weaving through laughter and the clinking of glasses. A long oak table stretched down the middle of the room, filled with familiar faces from work, all smiling and toasting to another successful quarter. I should have felt proud. After all, I had been part of the company's core operations team for over 6 years. I'd led initiatives that saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'd coached interns into managers. I'd sacrificed weekends, holidays, and more late nights than I could count. Tonight was supposed to be the moment it all paid off. For months, Gerald Kane, our divisional director, had hinted that I was on deck. He'd pull me aside during wrap-ups and tell me how senior leadership had their eyes on me. "It's just a matter of timing, Marla," he'd say with a knowing smile. So when he invited the team to this surprise dinner, I knew. Everyone did. Nadine even whispered to me before we sat down, "This is it, Marla." Finally. Except it wasn't. As the appetizers cleared and the servers began pouring champagne, Gerald stood at the head of the table, tapping his glass with the back of a butter knife. "Everyone, if I could have your attention just for a moment," he said, the chatter fading. "Tonight, I want to highlight someone who's brought an incredible energy and fresh thinking into our division." I smiled softly, heart fluttering. I reached up to straighten the sleeve of my dark teal dress. "She's only been with us a short time, but her impact has been undeniable. Her ideas have reshaped how we collaborate. Her execution, flawless." I couldn't be prouder to announce that Tessa Vaughn will be stepping into the role of Senior Operations Manager, effective immediately. There was a beat of silence. Then applause. I clapped too. Tessa, who had joined the team barely 4 months ago, looked stunned, almost sheepish, as she stood up. Her cheeks flushed pink as she offered a small, gracious nod. "Thank you so much," she murmured. "I'm truly honored." I took a sip of champagne to distract from the tightening in my throat. This wasn't happening. I kept smiling. I even leaned toward Tessa after the toast to offer my congratulations. "Well deserved," I lied. But my mind was drifting. Trying to understand. As the celebration rolled on, Gerald made his way toward me. He smiled, as though we were old friends meeting by coincidence. "And of course, Marla," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "You've been such a steady presence for years. We really appreciate all that you do." That was it. A sentence. A pat on the back. A dismissal. I nodded. "Thank you." Then he added, "Tessa's just already doing so much more than you ever did at that stage. She's exactly what we need right now." The words weren't cruel. But they landed like a slap. Tessa overheard. She looked mortified. "Oh, I wouldn't say that," she said quickly, but it didn't matter. The air had already thickened. I laughed politely. I played my part. I clinked glasses. I pretended not to notice the glances from colleagues who didn't know what to say. But inside, something inside me had shifted, something deep and unspoken. I'd been loyal. Reliable. Trustworthy. And overlooked. Again. When the evening ended and I stepped out into the cool night air, I didn't call a car. I walked 3 blocks in my heels, trying to settle the storm inside me. Then I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Subject, formal resignation notice. Gerald, please find attached my resignation letter, effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunity to work with this team over the past 6 years. Regards, Marla Jennings. I stared at the message for a moment before hitting send. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something unexpected, peace. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. Monday was coming, and Gerald Kane had no idea what it would bring. Monday morning, the office felt too bright. Not that anything looked different. The same patterned carpet. The same chipped corner on the receptionist's desk. The same smell of burnt coffee drifting from the break room. But to me, everything had changed. I stepped through the doors just past 8 a.m., coffee in one hand, a faint smile on my face. My resignation email had already landed in Gerald Kane's inbox the night of the party, but I hadn't received a response, not even a one-line acknowledgement. I wasn't surprised. Denial had always been Gerald's first move. At my desk, people were still filtering in. I greeted them casually. A few nodded back. A few smiled a little too brightly, already aware something was off. And one or two avoided eye contact altogether, likely having heard whispers but unsure what they meant yet. Tessa was already at her desk. She looked up briefly when I walked by, her face tightening, almost like she wanted to say something, but I gave her no window to speak. I didn't blame her. She didn't make the decision. But she had benefited from it. And she hadn't once checked in. By 9 a.m., the usual morning rhythm had begun. Clicks of keyboards. Murmurs from conference rooms. Laughter from the sales team corner. And then, Gerald's door opened. Marla. My office. Now. The chatter died almost instantly. I stood calmly, tucked my phone into my pocket, and walked to the office I'd walked past 1,000 times. Only this time, it wasn't just about the exit. It was about everything that came next. Inside, Gerald was seated, my resignation letter printed and lying flat in front of him like it was a foreign language he was still trying to translate. He didn't waste time. "You're resigning?" he asked. Not angry. Not panicked. Just, dumbfounded. Yes. Effective immediately? That's what the letter says. He frowned, clearly grasping for composure. This is very sudden. I wish you'd spoken to me about it first. I raised an eyebrow. Like the way you spoke to me about Tessa's promotion? His jaw flexed, the first sign of a crack in his veneer. That wasn't meant to be personal. She's been here for 4 months, Gerald. I've been here for 6 years. She's just brought in a new perspective. High energy. The kind of visibility we need with corporate leadership right now. And I brought results, I said calmly. Year over year. I trained half the team she's leading. But none of that seemed to matter Friday night. He leaned forward, tone softening. Marla, you've always been dependable. Steady. But sometimes companies need to take a different kind of leap. You mean someone younger? I cut in. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He paused, trying to read my tone. He shifted in his chair. Look, he said, voice now measured, maybe we didn't handle the promotion conversation well. That's fair. But leaving now, without any transition plan? That's emotional. And it's not you. I smiled politely. You're right, it's not me. It's who I became after years of being promised, next quarter, and, after the reorg, and, we're reviewing titles. This isn't emotional. This is deliberate. He looked genuinely thrown. Gerald was used to handling tension with charisma and vague flattery. It wasn't working anymore. So what are you going to do? He asked, the concern now real. Go to another firm? I'm going to build one, I replied. That gave him pause. Do you remember Elliot Harding? I continued. Your former CFO, the one you said wasn't strategic enough when you pushed him out last year? Gerald blinked, caught off guard. Of course I remember Elliot. Well, I said, placing my palms lightly on the edge of his desk, he reached out to me about 3 months ago. Said he was launching a consultancy firm. Asked if I'd consider leading the operational backbone. Gerald went still. And? I turned him down. Back then, I was still loyal to this place. I took a step back. Friday night changed that. His face twitched. It was sinking in. You're going with Elliot. I already accepted the offer. I start next week. There was no need to raise my voice. The silence in that room was doing all the work. Gerald leaned back, lips pressing into a thin line. You know we have non-solicit clauses with some of our clients. I've read my agreement, I said. Don't worry, I don't need to take anyone. I'm not chasing anyone. But if people reach out to me, that's different, isn't it? He didn't answer. He was calculating. I picked up my resignation letter from the desk and slid it back toward him. You'll want to keep this copy. I've already forwarded it to the regional VP. He nodded slowly. You know this won't be easy. Startups fail. A lot. Maybe, I said with a slight shrug. But at least I won't be waiting for people like you to tell me I matter. I'll already know I do. With that, I turned and left his office. The entire floor was watching as I walked back to my desk. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't have to. People already knew something had happened. And in a few minutes, they'd know exactly what. Back at my desk, I packed slowly and precisely, framed photo, notepad, mug, the ceramic plant Nadine gave me during the 2020 lockdown. Then, one last thing. I opened my inbox and drafted a short email. Subject: Resignation announcement. Dear team, today marks my last day with Weston Dalmer Group. Thank you for the many lessons, collaborations, and experiences over the past 6 years. I'm excited for a new chapter and wish you all the best moving forward. Warmly, Marla. I hit send. Within 5 minutes, the whispering started. By 10, I had Nadine at my desk. She was wide-eyed. It's true? I nodded, smiling. Yeah. It's time. She looked like she wanted to hug me and throttle Gerald at the same time. He's going to regret this, she muttered. He already does. And she wasn't wrong. That was the beginning of something Gerald Kane never saw coming. The following Monday, I stood outside a modest but striking office building in the city's innovation district. 3 stories tall, sleek glass front, and a subtle brass plaque near the entrance that read: Harding and Lennox Consulting Operations. Strategy. Integrity. I smiled as I took a breath and stepped through the front doors. No security badge yet, no formal welcome committee. Just quiet energy, people moving with purpose, and no one pretending to be more important than they were. This wasn't a company chasing status. It was building substance. Inside, Elliot Harding greeted me in the open common area. No corner office for him, just a long desk shared with a few other senior leaders. He looked rested, composed, and more alive than I'd ever seen him back in the Weston Dalmer boardroom. Marla, he said, shaking my hand, welcome. Let's build something better. And I believed him. Those first few weeks felt like planting seeds in real soil for the first time in years. I wasn't trying to prove myself, I already had. My title, Director of Strategic Operations, came with trust, autonomy, and a budget. I was expected to lead, not wait for permission. The team was smaller, fewer than 30 employees, but every one of them was sharp, driven, and collaborative in a way I hadn't experienced in years. There were no layers of vague bureaucracy, no games, no positioning for visibility. There was work, and there was impact. During my second week, Elliot invited me into a leadership strategy meeting. He turned toward me as naturally as if I'd been in the room for years. We've got 3 new client onboarding initiatives coming in Q3. Marla, I want you to oversee all 3, he said. You'll have full control over how we structure the delivery side. Build the teams however you need. Just like that. No conditions. No waiting for someone above me to get buy-in. I nodded. I'll get started this week. That was it. No drawn-out presentations, no defending my capabilities. They already knew what I brought to the table. And the most surprising part? I didn't feel the need to tell anyone about what had happened at Weston Dalmer. I didn't need to. But Weston Dalmer was still watching. It started with a message from Nadine, exactly 12 days after I left. Nadine, he's unraveling. I didn't need a name to know who she meant. Nadine, Gerald tried to push a project onto Tessa yesterday, something you use to manage start to finish. She completely froze in front of the regional leads. It was painful. She's not ready, and she knows it. I read the text twice and set my phone down, unsure of how I felt. Not vindicated. Not angry. Just, certain I had made the right decision. 2 days later, another message. Nadine, Marla. 3 clients have called this week asking where you went. One of them actually said they felt unmoored without you in their quarterly check-in. I didn't respond immediately. But a quiet smile crept across my face. I wasn't trying to steal clients. I hadn't even reached out to a single one. But in our industry, relationships matter more than titles. And I had built mine carefully over the years, earned trust that didn't vanish because I changed offices. That Friday afternoon, I received a message on LinkedIn from someone unexpected. Mark Ellison, head of Kenton Breyer Manufacturing, one of Weston Dalmer's largest clients, and a longtime partner of mine, had written. Heard you're with Harding and Lennox now. Congratulations. We'd love to set up a conversation about our Q4 transition strategy. Let me know if you're available. They were shopping. Not for flash. Not for rates. 4 people they could rely on. I forwarded the message to Elliot. 10 minutes later, he knocked on my door. "We've got something solid here, Marla," he said. "They follow people, not logos." He wasn't wrong. Within the month, 2 major clients from my Westendalmer portfolio had initiated transition discussions with us. Not because I pitched them. Not because I enticed them. But because they didn't feel confident staying without me. Meanwhile, back at Westendalmer, Gerald was losing his grip. Nadine sent me updates like postcards from a place I'd left behind. "The internal comms team is scrambling. They're trying to frame your departure as a strategic pivot, but nobody's buying it. Tessa's stopped showing up to weekly huddles on time. They pulled in 2 senior consultants to try and clean up your old reporting structures. It's chaos." I never responded to most of them. I didn't need to weigh in. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused on the present. And the present looked very good. By my 3rd month, I'd restructured Harding and Lennox's client implementation framework, onboarded 6 new mid-tier clients, and hired 2 promising operations managers to build out the team beneath me. I wasn't just thriving. I was creating something lasting. I hadn't lost anything by leaving Westendalmer. But they had lost something important. Me. Then, one afternoon in early spring, as the city thawed from its winter quiet, my assistant knocked gently on my office door. "Marla? There's a Gerald Kane on the phone. He asked for you by name." I didn't answer right away. I sat back, folded my hands, and let the quiet fill the space. "Would you like me to send him to voicemail?" she asked. I shook my head. "No. I'll take it." She handed me the receiver and closed the door behind her. I pressed the button and said calmly, "This is Marla." There was a long pause on the other end, then a voice I knew too well said, "Marla. I was wondering if we could talk." "Marla. I was wondering if we could talk." There was a flicker in Gerald Kane's voice I had never heard before. Not the casual confidence he wore at board meetings, or the performative warmth he turned on during team lunches. This was something else, strained, uncertain, bordering on regret. "I'm listening," I said. Another pause. "I'd rather not do this over the phone," he continued. "Would you be open to meeting? I'd like to speak in person." I hesitated for a moment, not because I felt conflicted, but because I wanted to make it clear. "I have 20 minutes. Tomorrow at 10. My office." "If you're serious." "Your office," he repeated, like the idea hadn't occurred to him. "That's right." A beat of silence. "Understood. I'll be there." I hung up without another word. The next morning, right at 10, Gerald arrived at Harding and Lennox. He looked smaller in person than I remembered, less put together, maybe even a little unmoored. I greeted him in the reception area and led him to my office without small talk. The office was bright, with clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a quiet view of the riverfront. It wasn't just a title plate on a desk, it was a space that represented the weight of my decisions, my capabilities, and finally, my authority. He sat. I didn't offer coffee. "So," I said, folding my hands, "what's on your mind?" He exhaled, clearly trying to stay composed. "I won't dance around it. Things haven't gone well since you left. You probably know that." I said nothing. Just listened. "I mishandled your departure," he continued. "And I may have misjudged the promotion decision. I see that now. I think I was looking for a quick fix, someone flashy for corporate. I didn't realize what we'd lose when you walked away." Still, I stayed quiet. There was no need to fill the silence. He leaned forward. "I've spoken with the board. We're willing to offer you a senior executive position. A full promotion, VP of Operations. Better compensation. Your own team. You'd report directly to our regional president. We want you back." It was said with practiced sincerity, but his eyes gave him away. This wasn't a redemption arc. This was survival. And for the first time, I let myself say it. "You didn't value what I brought to the company, Gerald. You valued how quietly I did it." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. I gave 6 years to Westendalmer. I delivered consistency, solutions, leadership, even when no one asked me to. And when it came time for a promotion, you gave it to someone who had barely unpacked their desk. She showed promise, he said weakly. And I showed results. He flinched. If I hadn't left, I continued, if I hadn't accepted Elliot's offer and started building something here, would we be sitting in this room right now? Would you have ever seen my worth? Gerald didn't answer. He didn't have to. You're not here because I'm brilliant, I said softly. You're here because you're bleeding clients, your team stretched thin, and your golden hire wasn't ready. He sank back in the chair, his shoulders slumping slightly. I know this is a lot to ask, he said, more subdued now. But we're in a bad place. If there's any version of you coming back, I'd do everything in my power to support it. I studied him. Once, this would have thrilled me. To be needed. To be chased. To finally be offered the recognition I deserved. But not now. Now, I had built something better, from the ground up, with people who had believed in me from the start. I stood. Thank you for coming, I said. But no. Gerald looked up, startled. No? I don't want a seat at your table anymore. I built my own. His expression shifted, part disbelief, part reluctant respect. I understand, he said after a moment, standing slowly. For what it's worth, Marla. I'm sorry. I nodded. I hope you mean that. He lingered in the doorway for a moment before finally leaving. And just like that, the chapter closed. The months that followed brought momentum like I had never experienced before. Word spread, about the firm Elliot had started, about the woman who had quietly left Westendalmer and taken leadership into her own hands. About the clients who followed not because of pressure, but because of trust. I mentored my new team the way I always wanted to be mentored. I gave them credit in meetings. I coached them on how to own a room. I told them to document everything and wait for no one to name their worth. I made sure they never felt invisible. And one morning, as I walked into a leadership offsite where I would present our firm's next year's strategic roadmap, I glanced at the nameplate in front of me. Marla Jennings, Chief Operating Officer, Harding and Lennox Consulting. I took a breath, then stepped up to the podium. Epilogue. A year later, a new name appeared in a trade publication I followed loosely out of habit. Gerald Kane, appointed interim director at a mid-tier logistics startup. Westendalmer had let him go. A week after that, a junior associate forwarded me a client inquiry from a familiar name, Kenton Breyer Manufacturing. Their subject line read: Reconnecting with Marla, partnership potential. Full circle. But I wasn't circling back. I was moving forward. People often ask if I left because I was angry. I didn't. I left because I was done being patient with people who needed to lose me before they understood my value. I didn't get loud. I got better. And I'll never apologize for that. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.